I'm Pam Cooper, co-founder of Boosterville, and I'm here to tell you that school fundraising stinks. 60 years ago, my grandma was a teacher whose students sold magazine subscriptions to buy library books. 30 years ago, my mom's marching band kids were pushing cheese and sausage to raise money to appear in the Rose Bowl parade. 10 years ago, it was me, with wrapping paper and cookie dough for classroom supplies. I know school fundraising. It's a broken industry, but Boosterville fixes it. Your school gets the money you need, but so do the local businesses within your community. Boost your school while you boost your local businesses. Buy local, boost local. Choose Boosterville.
Now for the football fan in your family, we have a very special treat. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell is here for a special presentation and discussion on health and safety for a new generation. During his tenure as commissioner, Goodell has addressed a wide range of issues to improve the NFL, including player health and safety, medical needs and pensions of retired players, and personal conduct. We are most honored to have him join us today and are excited to hear from his colleagues on sports safety and the value of sports participation, issues that are important to all of our members. Please help me welcome Commissioner Roger Goodell to the stage. Good morning. It's wonderful to see you. Welcome. At our convention in 2011, the PTA passed a resolution on head injury reporting, encouraging the PTA and its constituents to educate members and school personnel on head injuries in collaboration with state and local education agencies. This is clearly an issue that matters to our membership, and we are very pleased to see that the work of the NFL is doing to prioritize the health and safety of youth athletes. From its newly launched Heads Up Football initiative to its work with the CDC on concussion education to the passage of the Leicester Law in almost all 50 states. In addition, the NFL has adopted a leadership role when it comes to helping kids stay active. We are also so excited to be partnering with the NFL and the National Dairy Council on Fuel Up to Play 60, an in-school nutrition and physical activity program that helps students make positive changes in their schools by improving opportunities to consume nutrient-rich foods and get at least 60 minutes of physical activity every day. This fall, National PTA will highlight 10 specific Fuel Up to Play 60 activities that will help families bring the lessons of play, physical activity, and healthy eating from school to home. Play 60 was launched in 2007, and I am sure many of us in this room recognize the Play 60 bus commercials you see on TV. Using NFL players as role models, it is such a great campaign, and we are honored to help engage families in this successful model. It is our responsibility as parents and teachers to keep our children healthy and safe. And we know the value that playing sports brings to their social and physical development. So we are truly thrilled to be joining together this fall in a Back to Sports partnership with the NFL. Which I will let Commissioner Goodell explain. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Betsy. It's truly an honor and a privilege to be here today. I come here not just as commissioner of the NFL, but also a parent of twin daughters who just turned 12. Yes. In fact, I may be a little groggy. This morning they had their birthday party last night. By the time I got done cleaning up, it was after midnight, so I'm a little bit worn. But it was a thrill, and it's an absolute honor to be here to talk about our new partnership with you all, the PTA, and what we think will lead to, obviously, sports being a bigger part of the lives of our children, but most importantly, in a safe way. And that's what we're focused on. How do we continue to get our kids playing sports, but doing it safely? And Betsy talked an awful lot about our Play 60 program. It's something that we believe in. We don't encourage our children to necessarily play football. We just want them to be active. Whether you're riding a bike, you're playing on the playground, jumping rope, be active 60 minutes a day. And we also have the component, which Betsy mentioned, which is to make sure you're dealing with proper nutrition. And that's our Fuel Up to Play 60 program. These are initiatives that we believe in. But now we're building on that initiative with the PTA and all of you to celebrate back to sports. So come this fall, we'll all be celebrating back to sports and celebrating our kids participating in a way that's going to help them live healthier, more fulfilling lives. But we want them to do it safely. So you'll be getting an email from me in August. We'll be inviting parents in, school administrators, coaches, trainers, doctors, all so we can understand how to play the games we want to play and give the benefits to our children of active sports and active lifestyles, but do it in a safe way. So we're absolutely honored and privileged to be a part of the PTA initiative, and I promise you, Betsy, we're going to deliver some great results.
Thank you very much. We are definitely excited to be partnering with the NFL. And now I would like to ask Dr. Elizabeth Piroth of North Shore University Health System and former NFL player Lavar Arrington to please join us on stage. Dr. Piroth is the Associate Director of the Sports Concussion Program at North Shore, based in Chicago. She is also Head Injury and Concussion Specialist for the Chicago Bears, Blackhawks, White Sox, Fire, and Northwestern University, and numerous high schools across the state of Illinois. She also serves on USA Football's Heads Up Football Advisory Committee. Mr. Arrington, who played for the Washington Redskins and New York Giants, Mr. Arrington serves as an advisor and ambassador for Heads Up Football Initiative. They join Commissioner Goodell now for a discussion on sports safety and the value of sports. Please help me welcome them.
Well, I'm going to lead this off just for a few minutes, and then our friends are going to have an opportunity to speak, and then you all are going to have a chance to ask us any questions you wish. But I think a few points that we wanted to try to make up front. First, all three of us up here believe, and we believe most of you do, in the value of sports, what they do for our children. It's proven through research that kids that are active and healthy in sports are going to be more productive in school. They're going to live more productive lives, and they're going to continue those habits. And a lot of the skills and a lot of the learnings that we get from sports are lessons that stay with us through the remainder of our life. I played every sport I could get my hands on, and I loved it. And those lessons are still valuable to me today as Commissioner of the NFL. Whether it's discipline, whether it's teamwork, whether it's understanding more about myself and what I can accomplish. Those are the kinds of things we want to share with our kids and make sure that they can do it safely. The second is something that I believe firmly in, which is that we all have to watch who's supervising our children. When we leave the house with a babysitter or children with a babysitter, we want to make sure we know who that is, how they're being supervised. The same's true on a field or a court. Make sure we know who is coaching our children, that they're properly trained. They understand when an injury occurs what to do. Not to be a doctor, but to take them out and make sure that the proper people are notified and they get medical attention before they return to play. In addition, we also understand that in a world that we're living right now, there's a lot of information out there and a lot of misinformation, which is almost as difficult. One day we wake up and say that's healthy, the next day it's not healthy. And it's difficult for parents, it's difficult for all of us. One of those big myths that we had in the NFL that affected our players was that players had a tendency to live shorter lifespan than the average citizen. In fact, NIOSH, the government agency, did a study, said that actually our NFL players are living longer than the average life expectancy of others. So our players are actually living healthier lives. But for us as parents, as we make the tough decisions we have to make about how our kids participate in sports, I would encourage you to go to the CDC. And Dr. Piroth's going to talk more about this. But their website has information that I think can help you and work through some of the information that's out there that, quite frankly, in a lot of cases, isn't accurate. But that's a very safe area to go. Again, I would also mention what we're doing and what we think from a leadership standpoint. We believe the NFL is in a position where we can have an impact. We recognize that role. We recognize that people watch our athletes on the field, watch everything we do. And we have to do what we can to make our game safer so that every other game, whether it's other levels of football or every other sport, is played safely. So we focus on three main areas. Our rules. How do we take dangerous techniques out of the game? How do we teach kids to keep their head up? Keep the head out of the game. That's what we've referred to it. And when we do it, they're going to do it in college, high school, and youth football. And we're also seeing in other sports. I see it, my girls play soccer and lacrosse. Same thing, same principle. It's being taught, in large part because we brought this awareness that it is important to keep the head out of any game. The second, making sure you have the proper equipment, and most importantly, that it fits right. We want to make sure our children have that protection. The helmet in football is designed for protection. It is not designed as a weapon. And we need to work with our coaches and parents to make sure that the equipment is properly fit for every one of those children. Third is research. And this is how we think we can help change the world. We're partnering with companies like General Electric, investing $60 million in the next 4 years to help find better protection for our athletes in all sports for headgear. And also better diagnostic tools so that we can understand when a brain injury actually occurs. Leading scientists will tell you, Dr. Piroth will tell you also, that we know less about the brain and we have materials and equipment that should be advancing our knowledge of the brain, and we need to put more research into getting that equipment in place so that we all can benefit from what's happening in science and technology. So we believe we can create a better, safer game, again, not just in football, but in all sports. And it's our job to lead the way. And when we look at health and safety, we don't just look at the physical side of it. We look at the total wellness of our athletes, how they're doing physically, but also mentally. Life is about transitions. We all know how we have to work through our life. We go through several transitions. And we want to make sure we give our athletes the proper tools to make those transitions. That includes mental health counseling. It means working with our athletes to give them the skills to be able to do that. So I'm going to let Dr. Piroth now speak, and then our friend Lavar Arrington, on some of the other initiatives that we're working on that I think will affect everybody in this room.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that, and thank you, National PTA. I'm thrilled to be here talking about youth sports. As a concussion specialist, I am very well aware of the media's focus on concussion, particularly in contact sports like football and hockey. But I am frequently frustrated with the misinformation that's available to parents through the media, the popular press, and particularly the internet. And parents are utterly overwhelmed with this information. They tell me every day in my office that they don't know how to weed through what's available, And what happens is they tend to focus on the negatives. And they're very scared. I hear this every day from athletes and parents. Should I let my son play football? Should I let my daughter play soccer? And I think that it's important that along with the understanding the medical science behind concussions and other sports injuries, that we're also not forgetting the reasons we want our kids engaged in sports, the benefits of sports to kids. There's a reason why you sign your kids up for sports. There's a reason why they love it. And I think that we need to talk a little briefly about some of the research behind that. So I don't know if you have my slides. Thank you. So first off, I think one of can I have the first one, please? You could advance them all if you want. I think the first one is probably the most important, physical activity. We have an obesity epidemic in this country among our children, and you all know that, all right? You see this in your schools. The last thing we want is kids to be less active. And for a lot of kids, the only consistent exercise they get is through their sports participation. There's also a focus on health in these teams. A lot of kids learn about nutrition and other really important things on health through their participation in sports. Self-discipline and emotional control. You know, sports gives kids a socially appropriate, socially sanctioned way of dealing with these emotions. And particularly for boys, they need that physical contact. I hear it from kids all the time. One of the reasons they like football is that they can hit things. I have 2 boys, so I know what that's like. And you know, for people who call for sort of banishing of football, I always say, what are you going to get then? You know, how are kids going to learn to deal with those emotions? And my concern is you're going to get a lot more physical aggression in school, outside of the school, a lot of impulsive behaviors, because kids need to learn to control those emotions, and sports allows that. Improve school grades. Many of you in your own programs see this. A lot of schools have a minimum GPA that kids need to maintain to stay in those teams. And so they have higher grades. We know that student athletes have higher grades on average and higher graduation rates. Time management, this is a big one. You know, those of you who work with athletes, you know, they go to school, they go to practice, they come home, they do their homework. They learn how to manage their time. And it keeps kids off the streets and out of trouble. So that involvement in sports is really, really important. Social support and friendships. You know, for a lot of kids, this is their friendships. You know, this is how they manage the social hierarchy of high school and middle school that can be so brutal. And this is their way of having that built-in structure, which is really, really important. It's also a lot of social structure for parents, as I have found out through the years. Leadership opportunities, like Commissioner Goodell said, a lot of people learn that they have leadership qualities on the football field, on the soccer field, on the hockey rink. And those are important lessons that they learn as well. And I think this next one is something we don't talk enough about. This idea of self-identification as an athlete. I see athletes all day long who have a great sense of pride that they're athletes. And I think it's something that we need to honor. We need to look at that as a really positive thing in these kids' lives. College scholarships. You know, there are a number of kids who go to college simply because they're given athletic scholarships and would not have those opportunities. And finally, a very small percentage of people actually make a living doing these sports, as we all know. But it is a benefit for those people who have that skill. Personally, I find a lot of parents are too focused on the college scholarship part, and too many kids are focused on their unrealistic expectations that they'll make it to the bigs. But for the rest of kids, all of these other benefits are real and tangible. And so we need to be having that in the discussion too about sports. We need to find some balance of understanding the benefits of sports to kids along with the risks. So this is in no way saying that we're not worried about concussions. All I do for my entire career is about concussions. So we're very concerned about health and safety of these kids. I'm sorry, the next slide, please. Last year, I gave a similar talk in LA, and the week before, this quote was from the LA Times. A district had looked at their students and saw that athletes had higher GPAs, higher attendance rates, better standardized scores, And I would imagine if most of you did a similar survey in your schools, you'd find the same results. So again, this is something that we're seeing consistently and something we need to talk about. That last slide, please. These are my sons. Thank you. Thank you. Your incoming president, Elton Thornton, told me to use this slide. He said the ladies in the room would like it, so thank you. But I use this as just a good excuse to show my children. But also I think it's because there's so much focus on professional athletes. We talk a lot about the world of professional athletes and the world of collegiate athletes. But the reality is most of our kids are never going to get there. Most of our kids are going to play grade school and high school sports. So we need to be thinking about my sons and your daughters and the big picture. We need to be talking about how to keep kids engaged in sports for all those positive things, but keeping them safe. So that's why it's so important that organizations like the NFL and other major sports organizations come together and fund research and find ways to make sports safer. And that's why I'm so proud to be involved in the USA Football Advisory Committee, because I think they're doing it right. I think they're really taking a close look at how to make the game safer. So I think Lavar is going to talk more about that as well. So thank you.
Everybody stand up really quickly. Stand up. Everybody! Do it! I'll sit back now. I was going to do something, right? We're going to do stretches and calisthenics and all that stuff. That's not what that was about. I just wanted to reset you, so that you could hear everything that I was going to say to you. I'm Lavar Arrington, and I'm here on behalf of the National Football League and as a committee member of USA Football and the Heads Up Football Initiative. I'm a former player of the Washington Redskins, as it was stated. That is always nice when you get it. That is always nice. It's important for me to be here. One thing I'll say that is super ridiculously impressive that I'm looking at right now. No offense to the guys out there in the seats, but to see all of these lovely ladies sitting there, I think that's amazing. And the reason why it's amazing and why it's relevant to what we're discussing right now as it applies to sports is this initiative is really set up to empower mothers, not just dads. It's also geared up to empower you, the moms, because we know who are buying the spikes. We know who are loading them up in the cars to take them to the fields and doing all those things. So you guys are such a valuable resource. So it's appreciated that I had the opportunity to share a couple words with you. I'm here today to give a quick synopsis on why I feel football is something that has led to success in my life. Right now, I currently do a myriad of things. I do a radio show. I speak for 5 hours Monday through Friday, every week, 365 days, minus those weekends, of course. But I speak for a living. I challenged myself to write. I was a blogger for the Washington Post for several years, and I'm still a contributor for the Washington Post. I do television. Of course I do television. That was a joke. That was a joke. But here's the thing. This is what you have to understand. Whether it's football or any other sport, I think the theme remains the same. And that theme being, we have to understand what sports represent. And I think that's gotten lost. I think it's gotten lost in fear. I think it's gotten lost in being, lazy. I think it's gotten lost in a lot of different things. Our lives are meant to be purpose-driven lives. The things that we do in our everyday living is supposed to be purpose-driven. The one resource that you can't buy, it's the most precious resource, right, is what? Who said it? Somebody said it. It's time. We don't get time back. and we don't know how much time we have, so you want to be as purposeful as you possibly can be. Sports serves as a microcosm of life. All right? When you play sports, our greatest leaders have had to learn to follow. They had to learn how to be great leaders. You'll never find a great leader that didn't have someone that they followed. That's what football represented to me. My father is a wounded warrior. And so we can sit here and enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy because of people like my father, and shouts out to the entire armed forces. I stand here as a 3-time All-Pro, a 3-time Pro Bowler, and my father never ran with me one day in my entire life. He gave his leg and his foot to protect the freedoms that we enjoy. My dad never ran with me one time in my life. We had conversations. We have them all the time as a youngster and even now as an adult. And the things that he used to say to me, he loved football. We used to always watch all kinds of football films. Gale Sears, Dick Butkus, you name it, Lawrence Taylor. I'm from Pittsburgh. I know we're in Cincinnati, but I'm from Pittsburgh, so we did a lot of Steeler film as well. I'm a big Greg Lloyd fan. I ended up being a linebacker because, well, that was a defensive town. You know, I have steel running through my veins. So, anyways, we're neighbors. We're neighbors, so don't hate me. Don't hate me. That's a sidebar. But my dad used to always say to me, he loved football because football represented the closest thing to what he saw when he was in the military. And I used to ask him, I was like, you know, why? I mean, basketball, this and that. He was like, well, basketball has strategy, you have teammates. But it always came back to football being the ultimate team sport. In basketball and in soccer and other sports and lacrosse and all these different sports you play, you do offense and defense. Whereas in football, you have to depend on different units, different infantries or different branches. You know, I used to always call our defense, it's funny, I used to always call our defensive guys, we were the Rangers. You know, if you know about the military, the Rangers, they go in first. So I used to always set the tone with our guys and say, you know what, this group is the Rangers. But it was a thought and it was a belief, that understanding that the sport itself is merely geared towards teaching us how to deal with life. There are so many different things, so many different lessons that I learned from my father talking about the game. And I fell in love with the game because of what it meant to him. And I used to try to play the game the way that he used to say it to me and to my brothers. So ultimately understanding that it's great to play the sport itself. It's great to have success in the sport itself. But ultimately, it's teaching you and preparing you, just like going to school and sitting in classrooms, just like going to churches, wherever it is that, whatever God it is that you pray to, whatever it may be. All these things are preparation for our lives. I'm not saying don't be concerned about injuries. I'm not saying that. And injuries are very real. But what I will tell you is, I'm not a doctor, but I can guarantee you this. Life hits harder than any football player ever will. You hear what I'm telling you? Let me close out by saying this. Heads Up Football, the reason why I'm so passionate about representing Heads Up Football and being a part of USA Football and what they're doing is because football does not need to go away. You do not need to take your children out of the sport of football. But as it has already been stated, it needs to be a premium by moms and dads, there needs to be a premium placed on doing it the right way. All right? And I'll say this in closing, because I am committed, and I hope everyone in here is as well. I'm committed to doing everything that I possibly can to make sure that young people have the same experiences that I was allotted to have. I don't know what I would be or where I would be if I did not have football. Football has shaped and molded me in so many different ways. You get knocked down, you get back up. The person that got knocked down 6 times, how many times did they need to get up? 7. Those are the things that I've learned playing this game. And I appreciate Commissioner Roger Goodell. I appreciate everyone that has made this a priority to not ignore, but address. And that's what we're here to talk to you about. I, on behalf of Heads Up and as a committee member of USA Football, hope that everyone doesn't just hear what I said, but gets involved. Go home, get on your iPad, get on your computer, and make sure you get involved, because you have the power to make a difference. Each and every last one of you have the power to make a difference. I appreciate your time, and I think right now we're going to take questions. So direct them to everyone else except me.
I do believe we're going to take some questions. If we could raise the house lights or turn on the mic lights, please.
Betsy, while the next question, or first question is coming up, if I could just take 1 minute. I know there's been a lot of talk about Redskins in Pittsburgh, but we're in Bengals country today. And one of the greatest teachers, the guy who probably brought teaching to pro football, was a guy named Paul Brown. His son is now the owner of the Cincinnati Bengals. Mike Brown, his daughter, is now the president of the Cincinnati Bengals, and I'd just like to acknowledge them and Troy Blackburn right over here in the front.
Really short. I'm Lori Harding and I'm from Utah. I have a son who has a heart of gold, but he is a Rudy, if you know what I mean, coming into football. What recommendations do you have for moms whose kids have gigantic hearts but not so much talent, and you want them to succeed in the sports of their choice? Any recommendations?
That's a great question. I think that Rudies are the best football players in our game, to be honest with you. It's kind of like that poster. You know, my mother was a school teacher. I failed to mention that, but my mother was a school teacher. Shouts out to my mom. I love you, Mom. It's kind of like that picture with the little cat looking into the mirror and he sees a lion, right? Well, that's what I believe teaching the fundamentals and getting back to doing things the right way. You need to reward players, not so much athletes. Now, it's always great when an athlete is a player, but ultimately you want to reward players. And I think that when it gets back to the fundamentals, the bare minimum of what you do, technically speaking, on the football field, well, a Rudy can actually even the playing field quite a bit just by knowing how to do things the right way. And there is no substitute for the immeasurable. Is that a word, immeasurable? I speak for a living. That thing that's under your chest plate, that beats, there's no measurement of that. Sure, you can get the rate of it, how fast does it move? But a person's heart, that's an intangible. And as long as your little Rudy has that intangible, I'd say encourage him to no end.
I believe we have a question in microphone 4.
I speak for a living too. I actually have two questions, or two thoughts. First of all, I played football with Andre Waters at Cheney University. So the, thoughts of concussion really resonates with a lot of us who loved him dearly as friends. And in your work with the schools and the parents, are you looking to educate more on the importance of recognizing symptoms and things like that with the kids who play sports, so there can be more of a heightened awareness at this level? And my second question is, my sons play youth football, and to be quite honest with you, I'm very unimpressed with the coaches. I really am, I'm just being honest with you. They become overly aggressive. They're teaching, one team my son played against, they were teaching these kids to headhunt, to physically hurt other players so that they can get to the championship. And my question to you is, obviously youth football is not your area of focus, but is there anything to try to educate those coaches to put more of an emphasis on the education and life skills aspects of sports than just winning championships?
Let me take a shot at that, because I do believe that's part of our responsibility. When we're in the National Football League, we think our position of leadership is that we do have a responsibility to help on the youth football level. That's why we've worked with USA Football to establish what we call a heads-up program. And what it is designed to certify coaches so that we can teach those coaches the proper techniques. They're not watching some movie and thinking this is the way it works. They're actually being in classroom work and being taught techniques and the way to run practices. That's number one. And so you should encourage, if you're having your children play, those coaches should be certified. And USA Football is out in a pilot program this year. We are already over 2,000 organizations that have signed up for this. I believe it's over 60,000 coaches have already been signed up, and more can be certified. And that's going to help us teach the right techniques. Part of that training is also to recognize symptoms of dehydration, of concussions, not to be doctor. And Dr. Piros will tell you that nobody wants anyone to be playing doctor out there if you're not medically trained for that. But to recognize symptoms that this young person needs to come out and be seen by a doctor, whether it's football, soccer. And that's what when I watch my girls play sports, that's the number one thing I want to watch is, do they recognize when somebody has an injury, and do they treat them conservatively and take them off the field and not allow them to return? The safety of our kids is the most important thing. That's what I want, and that's what everybody else in this room, I'm sure, wants.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you hit on the head. The education to parents and coaches is really paramount. Part of the Heads Up program is concussion awareness. So we're teaching coaches, we're teaching in the athletes themselves too, what are the signs and symptoms of concussion. And many of you may know that there are 47 states who have mandatory concussion laws. And what most of them mean, they're all similar generally. Most of them are based on the Zach Lystad law in the state of Washington. And basically, if any child shows any signs or symptoms of concussion, they must be removed from play, and they're not allowed to return until they've been cleared by a medical professional trained in concussion assessment. So, the nice thing is that decision's been taken away from coaches and parents who can't just say, oh, he's fine, let him go back in. And that's a really important advancement. The NFL was very involved in that, and the Lystad family did an incredible amount of advocacy to make sure that's part of the legislation in each state.
Thank you. Microphone 3.
Yes, my name is Charles Scott from Tennessee. First of all, thank you for the initiative you're taking on. I know many of us have been coaching for youth and football, high school football, and my question is, as you mentioned, the trend that the youth will look at, but the NFL currently is looking at some of these super athletes, and currently it looks like they're not wearing hip pads or knee pads and pads up higher. Is it anything that NFL is looking at that regard, or speaking to the safety point from that youth are not emulating that? Or in terms of youth, do you feel like they should have that additional protection for the hips and the knees?
Well, I guess I'd start as that we assume that other levels of football and frankly other sports are going to emulate what our athletes do. You have to expect that. And that's why we have this responsibility to hold ourselves to a standard that's very important to us. We do believe players should be wearing the thigh and knee pads. And we are actually making that mandatory this year. After several years of negotiating with our players, it's going to be mandatory. I don't know how many injuries it'll prevent, but I do know this. They're safer wearing those pads than without them. And to your point, I think younger kids are going to say, they're wearing them, I should wear them.
Thank you. Another question? Microphone 2.
Hi, and good morning. My question is to the Commissioner. In regards to heads of sports, could you speak to, if you have available, the opportunity for the special education culture? Are the sports modified in such a way that special learners will have an opportunity to at least glean from heads of sports and then are able to apply what they glean in knowledge to everyday life, even if or whether or not they're able to play the sport or not? Thank you.
Yeah, you touch on some very important points, and Lavar touched on it also. I played 9 years of tackle football, starting in 4th grade, and I wouldn't get back a single day of playing the game of football. Not just because I love the athletics, but because the same skill sets, the life skills that I learned, discipline, teamwork, character building, leadership, all those things are what I use every day in my life. And I believe that's true for every kid that plays sports in general, team sports in particular. And I think Lavar used the term, and I believe it myself, football is the ultimate team game. So if you have a young Rudy out there, one of my favorite movies, but he just showed us something in that movie. He showed us that you can overcome. If you work hard and you believe in yourself and you find that dream, you can make it come true. That's what we want for our kids. We want our kids to believe in themselves and believe they can do something. And whether you have special needs, you don't have special needs, we all have needs. And we have a need to be successful. We have a need to try to believe in ourselves. And I believe football teaches that. And the Heads Up program is not just about developing football players. It's about developing people who are going to live a productive and healthy life and learning those skills. And we're not interested in just developing football players. So many more. We have 6 million kids playing football, 3 million playing tackle this year. A very, very small percentage of those will ever get to the NFL level. But there's a lot of kids who can benefit from that game.
Thank you. Another question? I don't see any lights. Okay, we'll go to microphone 3.
Hi, I don't have a football player, I have a hockey player.
Me too.
And, yeah, hockey mom. All right, my question, my son's been playing since he was 4, he's 16, and he's had 2 concussions that we know of. One of my issues is that, equipment, it's a big business. A lot of professional athletes go out there and say, this is the best stick, this is the best helmet. And I think right now that's the thing we're talking about is concussions. Where does somebody like me go to say, where's the best helmet? Because this guy says it's the best helmet, and this other athlete says it is. So where is my resource to go to find the best protection?
For any information about concussions, I always tell people first to go to the CDC. The Center for Disease Control has done a phenomenal job of sort of looking at all this research and putting together the best research. But I can tell you as a general rule when it comes to equipment, the name on the outside has very little to do with the quality of the helmet. It's all about fit. If it's a hockey helmet or a football helmet, lacrosse helmet, it doesn't matter, it's about fit. And that's why part of the USA Heads Up program is about teaching parents and coaches how to properly fit. because oftentimes you're just given a helmet at the beginning of the season, and the assumption is that it fits properly and the need doesn't change during the season. So really make sure that when you buy the helmet, you bring it to somebody who knows something about that helmet and how to fit it properly, and make sure. I'm a hockey mom, and so we know that there's those screws that you turn. Make sure that someone's looking at them on a regular basis to make sure the helmet is fitting. Because one of the problems that we have with concussion is there's always something new coming out, and I always tell parents, keep a skeptical eye when some of these claims that you hear. You are never going to get a concussion-proof helmet. Make that very clear. Until you can figure out a way to get your brain to stop moving inside your skull, you're going to get concussions. Helmets were not designed to prevent concussions. Helmets were designed to prevent skull fractures and other more serious injuries like hemorrhaging. So the focus needs to be on proper fit.
The lifetime of a helmet. How long?
It depends on a number of factors. There's standards and NOC standards that you'll see a little sticker. Particularly when it comes to football helmets, you want to make sure that if they're refurbished, that they're then follow the NOC standards. There's a lifetime on these helmets. It's not like a bicycle helmet. You don't need to replace them every time they get contact, or you'd be, buying a helmet a lot. So in those sports. You really need to be looking at the padding, making sure it hasn't degraded, and making sure the straps and that still are affording you a good fit. That's the key thing. And the kids grow, as we know, constantly buying new hockey equipment. So you need to be looking at that.
I just say one other point. Make sure you don't let your kids modify the helmets. There are a lot of times, and we see this even at the NFL level, they want to be different, and they want to modify the helmet in some fashion. They want to change the chin strap. Don't let them do that. The helmets are designed to be worn in a particular way, and make sure they do that. One other quick point would be, and the doctor said it, on a regular basis you have to check the fitting. If a kid has a haircut, it can change the way that helmet's going to fit them. Or if their hair grows longer. You have to really keep an eye on that. So on a regular basis, and I do mean a regular basis, keep a real good eye on that. Make sure that helmet is tight and well fit and being worn properly.
Great advice. Great question. We have time for one last question. Let's go to microphone 1.
Hello, thank you. My question is, we actually have the legislation in our state where parents have to sign. And what we're finding, at least in my school district, is that the parents sign, but they're not really receiving a lot of information, or if they are, they're not understanding what it is in regards to concussions. When we've gone to the proper people up at the school board, we've actually been shut down. And so we're not sure how to, at this point, get the information out, correct information out, in a wide manner, with the support, hopefully, of the school district behind us.
It's a challenge. It is. There's a lot of information, and how do you figure out what to give? But I think that meetings like this and focusing on that puts the impetus back on schools. And I say to school districts that I work with a lot in Illinois, this is not an injury that you need to be responding to. You need to have a set protocol. There needs to be an established way of handling these injuries for liability. I mean, I would sort of focus on the liability exposure that they have is if there were a more catastrophic injury and they didn't have some sort of set standard. And this is true for any injury. You need to be looking at hydration and sudden cardiac arrest and other things, spinal cord injuries that are addressed, that can occur in sports. So regardless of what the injury is, the legislation helps do that. But again, the CDC has a lot of really good information for parents and students and administrators and coaches. So I would look there if you're looking for any sort of cheat sheet, if you will, to present to your schools.
We want to thank you, all three, Commissioner Goodell, Mr. Arrington, Dr. Durham. We have learned so much today, and we are truly excited and just a little gift from National PTA. Give the pink one. I was being very, very sensitive to that. Thank you very much. Thank you.
No more handouts for schools. Instead, waves of new customers seeking out your business, intentionally making new purchases locally, knowing a portion benefits their school. That's Boosterville. Sell local, buy local, boost local. Boosterville.